as you've been hearing in the news today, French voters have taken part in a US-style primary to choose the candidate of the centre-right Republican Party in next year's presidential election. Former President Nicolas Sarkozy suffered a shock defeat. He was knocked out in round one. This Sunday's battle for the Republican ticket will now be fought by former Prime Ministers François Fillon and Alain Juppé. With us to make sense of both the candidates and the numbers is Bruno Cautrès. He's a political analyst with Sciences Po here in Paris. You're very welcome to Paris Live PM.
Thanks so much.
Now, the primaries come amid a time of great political uncertainty, and in line with recent political events around the world, it seems that once again the pollsters have misjudged things. The more centrist Juppé was the favourite, but the right-wing Fillon, he came out way ahead in the end. So a nice open question to start with. What do you make of all of this?
I think it's not a complete failure of the polls, because the polls have shown clearly since about 2 weeks that there was a dynamics in favor of François Fillon. So the last polls was showing that it could be that François Fillon would lead the first round and qualify for the second round. What was unexpected is how much he has been the leading candidate for the first round. The margin that he has with Alain Juppé is so big, it's nearly 16 points, so it's quite a big margin in favor of François Fillon. So I wouldn't say that the polls have been absolutely wrong. I would say that the pollsters have obviously difficulties on today, many democracies, to forecast, to anticipate the volatility, the fluidity of the voting choices in many countries, including France. For a primary election, the voters can finally switch between one candidate to another one. It is exactly the same political family, and for a voter, it's not going to be so difficult to switch from one to the other one. Would be very surprising that the polls are going to fail to predict the second round anyway, because François Fillon has obviously so many big chances to be the winners. We cannot see how Alain Juppé could finally win that primary election. It's going to be a big shock for Alain Juppé. That was, yes, the favorite.
Now, just looking at the turnout, which was quite high, in excess, I think, of 3.5 million people, the pollsters thought that a high turnout would actually favour Juppé because he would attract voters outside of the core Republican bloc, and that members of the left would be mobilised to vote for him. Turnout was high, but he came second anyway, as you said, by quite a big margin. This seems puzzling. So who did those who were not members of the core Republican bloc actually vote for then? So
what we know on today is that about 2/3 of the participants to the primary have a right-wing and centrist right identity. They are, mostly speaking, they are rightist. A little bit of these participants come from the left. Finally, we've got about 10 to 15 maximum having a partisan identification on the left, and about the same of coming from the Front National. So what I think is that actually the mobilization of the right wing has been extremely high. It is not exactly the same model as what people were expecting. People were expecting that mobilization would come from the center right, and finally the mobilization went from the right. And what looks extremely obvious from that election is that not only the right-wing electorate is extremely mobilized for that primary election, but also they are already mobilized for the coming presidential election. They want to win that election. They want to get a good candidate. They want to eliminate François Hollande from the picture. And the right-wing is already super mobilized by that.
Now, let's look at the candidates themselves. Sarkozy, while he was largely focused during his campaign on identity, immigration and security, Fillon has promised to sort out the country's bureaucracy. He's campaigned on a business-friendly platform. Tell us, what is it exactly that stands out about Fillon and that was clearly so appealing to voters?
It's exactly that. I think that Sarkozy went probably only on one side of the story. the French right-wing voters are extremely worried and preoccupied by a question of security, but it's only one side of the question. The second side, which is the most important one, have been covered by François Fillon, which is less tax, less public sector, less public expenditures, less deficits. So François Fillon, since the beginning that he engaged himself into the primary election, he constantly went on this topic. Just remember that when François Fillon was actually the prime minister of Nicolas Sarkozy, he has a very, very clear statement one day by saying, I am the head of the government of a country which is actually nearly bankrupt. So Fillon, since many, many times, actually has been identified by the right-wing voter as the tough guy that wants to reform with sharp reforms the French model. And probably that Sarkozy has underestimated that side of the story and overestimate the demand of the French voters towards security, identity, immigration.
Yeah, I remember he did actually at one time refer to Fillon simply as his employee.
Yes. And Sarkozy probably underestimated the capacity of François Fillon to liberate himself from the Sarkozy time when Sarkozy was the president and Fillon the prime minister.
Now, this is a US-style primary, the very first for the French Conservative Party. It's natural for our international audience to look for parallels here. So let's just take a brief look at how François Fillon compares to US President-elect Donald Trump, who was another surprise victor. Fillon, he's quite serious, quite a somber character. Isn't he? It doesn't appear that he has much in common with Trump, either in style or appearance.
The style is extremely different. First, Fillon comes from the inside of the political life, when Trump comes from the outside. Fillon is an extremely well-known politician since many times. He has been minister, he has been several times, he has been the prime minister during 5 years. So obviously François Fillon is an extremely well-known figure of French politics before that primary. The second thing is that François Fillon has always pushed its communication about the seriousness, that this typical attitude that he has, that he's quite vertical, that he talks extremely seriously, he's not joking with the journalists, these kind of things. And François Fillon constantly wanted to explain to the right wing, I'm not like Sarkozy. You will not get scandal with me. It's not going to be a show. I have not a private life, which is with a superstar. My wife is super discreet. So François Fillon is exactly like if you have Sarkozy minus the show and minus the scandals.
Fillon, he doesn't really go for inflammatory rhetoric, although he has suggested that the Muslim community is to blame for problems in French society. The polls do suggest that with the ruling Socialist Party very unpopular, that they're unlikely to make it past the first round. So the winner of the Republican primary is likely to face far-right leader Marine Le Pen for a spot in the presidentials, or for the position as president. Can we expect then, do you think, to see Fillon move more closer to the right in attempt to win over those voters who might vote for Le Pen?
It is first quite clear that primary election is like if you get the first round of the presidential election already. So part of the presidential election is over. I would say we know more or less who will be in the second round of the presidential election. It is likely that it will be François Fillon against Marine Le Pen. The second point is that François Fillon already has done the job to be quite far on the right on the economic issues. I cannot see François Fillon going too much on the security, identity, immigration, because actually he wants to win the primary election first to have the full support of the core set of the right-wing voter. François Fillon will get that support, and I cannot see how Marine Le Pen could win the next presidential election, because the right wing is going to have a candidate coming out from a primary which is a popular success, is going to get a full support of its camp, and it is extremely likely that if François Fillon wins the primary, it is extremely likely that he will be the next president.
Now, the more moderate Juppé, the mayor of Bordeaux, he was the favourite for months in this primaries contest. Many thought that he was in a prime position to be the country's next president. Now he's in a very difficult position. He'll be going head-to-head with Fillon this week in a debate. He'll need to pull a rabbit out of a hat. Can we expect things to get nasty at all?
Not really, because when you look just to the figures already talks about the second round, that there is no chance for Alain Juppé to recover. Not only there is no chance because he got not such a big score on the first round, but also because Nicolas Sarkozy yesterday called for supporting François Fillon, but also Bruno Le Maire, another candidate of that primary election, and I cannot see how Juppé could recover and get a majority of the right wing. Alain Juppé on yesterday evenings has made a statement which is clearly having the same strategy as he got during the primary, which is to appeal on the centrist and to say to the right-wing voters, with me, there will be reforms, but it's going to be reasonable reforms. On yesterday, we have seen that the right-wing doesn't want that program. The right-wing, the French right-wing did not validate it on yesterday, the centrist strategy of Alain Juppé, and it is certainly a big mistake that Alain Juppé has done, which is to underestimate the will of the right-wing voters to have a sharp set of reforms on the side of the economy and the social model.
The round two runoff, that's next Sunday, so just a week. Is this deliberately structured this way, this short period of time, to avoid the primaries from creating divisions within the party?
It's the classical organization of a two rounds election in France. There is only the exception of the presidential election, where we have 2 weeks before round one and round two. But when we have the legislative election with 2 rounds, it's only 1 week. When we have the municipal election, it's going to be also 1 week before the 2 rounds, between the 2 rounds, sorry. So no, I think that it is the tradition in France that there is only 1 week, maximum eventually 2 weeks between 2 rounds of election. And I think that it's going to play a fundamental role, because in about a week, the right wing is going to have a candidate, when exactly at the same time the left still has no candidate. We will know eventually the candidate of the left, not before January, and between now and January, François Fillon is going to have plenty of time to develop its program and to have a full media coverage.
Now, my last question for you is about where the Republican primaries have actually left the state of the party itself. Sarkozy said that he was very proud of having come back and unified the party after he lost to Hollande. We've seen what the primaries did to the Republican Party over in the US. How has France's Republican Party fared through its primaries ordeal?
So what the primary has shown concerning the party, first is the party was successful in organizing. When Sarkozy went back to politics, it was just after that horrible, messy story of François Fillon against Jean-François Copé, 2 leaders of the right wing, combating publicly and attacking themselves. So when Sarkozy went back, that was clearly to get back the right wing into order, to make it function. Sarkozy did it. So it is not exactly the same situation as in the Republican Party, because Sarkozy went to the party to take the leadership of the party with that number one objective, and he did it finally. So the primary organization with the mobilization 4 million of voters is showing that the party works. The second thing is that the ideological divisions between the candidates are showing that the right wing in France is more divided than expected. There is really some differences. There are really some differences between Alain Juppé, François Fillon, but also Nathalie Kosciusko-Morizet, other candidates. And in particular, it's about the relationship between the right wing and the Front National. On one side, you have the Sarkozy strategy, which is still there in the party, which is the right wing have to make the link with the extreme right voters. the extreme right voters have been right-wing voters that have been lost by the right-wing party, the Republican. You have another strategy, which is that the right wing should go to the center, and eventually that was a Juppé strategy, eventually to have a new majority between the right, the center left, eventually.
Okay, well, I suppose Sarko's final success then, perhaps ensuring that a Republican makes it to the Élysée Palace in May. We'll have to leave it there. Our thanks to Bruno Cautrès, a political analyst with Sciences Po here in Paris. Thanks for being on the program.
Thanks.